News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Alexis Christoforous. Here are the stories we're following today.
Alexis, tensions are building once again between the U.S. and Iran as the world waits for Iran's response to a U.S. peace offer. Overnight, the U.S. attacked missile and drone launch sites inside Iran that it says were used to attack 3 U.S. warships in the Strait of Hormuz. It's after Iran accused the U.S. of targeting 2 of its oil tankers and striking civilian areas along its southern coast and Qasem Island. But President Trump says the ceasefire is still intact.
They trifled with us today. We blew them away. They trifled. I call that a trifle. I'll let you know when there's no ceasefire. You won't have to know.
And President Trump's threatening to hit Iran even harder if it doesn't reach a deal. We get more from Bloomberg's Jumana Bersachi in Dubai.
There is a strong push from the U.S. side to get a deal across the line, but we are still in this period where we're waiting to hear back from the Iranians officially about the 14-point, one-page proposal that the U.S. has put forward. As you were reporting earlier in the week, some of the demands that the U.S. have put on that paper are deemed to be quite maximalist from Iran's standpoint, so it is unclear at this point whether there can be some form of a compromise, and indeed whether you can get to a compromise over a 30-day period.
Bloomberg's Jumana Bersachi reports Iran is still expected to respond to the U.S. offer through Pakistani mediators in the next 2 days.
President Trump is moving ahead with plans to hold a summit with his Chinese counterpart, Xi Jinping, next week in Beijing, and he's bringing some big-name guests along with him. Bloomberg's Tom Busby reports from New York.
The president bringing a who's who of American business leaders for next week's summit in China, despite there being no resolution to the U.S. war against Iran. Now, among those planning to attend, Blackstone CEO Steve Schwarzman, Citigroup CEO Jane Fraser, with Semaphore reporting that the administration also plans to invite Kelly Ortberg of Boeing, Jensen Huang of NVIDIA, and others. Trump and Xi slated for a sit-down meeting May 14th and 15th. That summit has already been postponed once due to the war. Tom Busby, Bloomberg Radio.
Tom, thanks. Let's turn to politics in the UK now. The Labour government is taking heavy losses as the first wave of local election results comes in. For more, let's go to London and get the latest with Bloomberg's James Woolcock. Good morning, James.
Nathan, Alexis, Prime Minister Keir Starmer says the results are very tough, there's no sugarcoating it, and that he takes responsibility for the losses. We're still waiting on the majority of results, but the early signs are it is a disastrous election for the governing Labour Party. The right-wing Populist Reform UK Party are set to pick up hundreds of seats already. They've taken control of 2 councils in elections in England. And as we wait for the rest of the day, we are still waiting on Wales and Scotland elections too, where Labour are also set to perform very poorly. The question now for markets and people in the UK is, does the Labour Party decide that Keir Starmer needs to be a change in leader as well as someone who is an election loser? In London, James Woolcock, Bloomberg Radio.
Thanks, James. And President Trump says he's giving the European Union until July 4th to ratify its trade agreement with the U.S. Bloomberg's Juan Potts reports from London.
Having previously threatened to hike tariffs on auto imports as soon as this week, Donald Trump has extended his deadline for the EU to ratify its trade deal. The move comes after Trump spoke to European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. Negotiators from the European Parliament and member states discussed potential amendments to the deal earlier this week, but we're told didn't reach any conclusive decisions. In London, I'm Ewan Potts, Bloomberg Radio.
Ewan, thanks. A major piece of President Trump's effort to rebuild his tariff walls just been declared unlawful. A federal trade court's invalidated the president's 10% global tariffs under Section 122 of the 1974 Trade Act. That law had never been invoked before to impose tariffs, but the president used it back in February after the Supreme Court struck down his sweeping emergency tariffs. The court says the ruling against Section 122 only applies to the group of small businesses that challenged it, along with Washington State. It's unclear what the ruling will mean for other importers that have been paying those duties.
And turning to the markets now, futures are higher ahead of today's key jobs report. Economists are expecting a slowdown in hiring in April. The median forecast is for a gain of 65,000 jobs and the unemployment rate to hold steady at 4.3%. Bloomberg's Michael McKee reports.
It's a one-number increase as far as economists and investors are concerned. With immigration near zero, the labor force isn't growing much, which means headline job growth is going to be a lot smaller. That's why the Fed will pay attention to the unemployment rate. If it's not rising, it's not signaling problems for the employment side of their mandate. And near record low jobless claims suggest unemployment is stable. There will be some focus on average hourly earnings, which are forecast to rise. Policymakers are looking for any signs labor shortages or rising costs of things like gasoline are pushing up on inflation. Michael McKee, Bloomberg Radio.
And that's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Alexis Christoforous.
I'm Nathan Hager, and this is Bloomberg.